In order to have this conversation about TikTok, and I'm talking about a real conversation that doesn't include conspiracy theories or dismissals of the app being a national security threat. We can't have a conversation of substance if you are going to say that every company steals data. Now, we're not going to be able to understand what is going on because we understand that already. If you only choose to identify aspects of this subject that you have heard on social media, well, you're not going to understand that the risk is real. And I'm going to do my best to explain this by using credible data that you can use to follow up on independently so that you can verify and confirm. And I strongly suggest that you should. In case I have missed something and you have reference material that I can review and confirm as well. Because first of all, we need to begin by talking about what TikTok is doing.
TikTok is collecting data, private data, personally identifiable data, internet addresses, location data of individuals. The second issue, and while that's not too unusual because we've seen it with Facebook and other tech platforms, but the second issue is that TikTok is a Chinese company.
This part is very important for you to understand. She states that collecting of data by a company is not unusual. She agrees. I mean, she even states that other companies have done this. This is important to acknowledge that she says this. This is known. This is confirmed. What is not being heard is what follows after that point is made. And that is the fact that TikTok is a Chinese company.
Which means that at any point in time, the Chinese government could turn to TikTok and ask it to hand over all of its information. And why that's important, the third reason, is because we don't know what China would do with that data. There's certainly concerns in the national security circles that it would be used for espionage. But what we know is that China is collecting a lot of data in their breaches, and then also the opportunity to collect it through Chinese companies like TikTok. And just as a hypothetical, if we were to find out that China had breached a company like 23andMe, and we combined the theft of data from a company like 23andMe with the personally identifiable information of a company like TikTok, that would certainly be disturbing.
So understand what she just said. China could use the data collected to use for corporate espionage. That goes beyond someone getting your data to steal your identification. This is information that can be used to compromise various industries that can harm our economy.
So as a nation, we don't want to be reacting to something like that. We want to be thinking proactively about how to secure the nation and its citizens.
And that right there is why TikTok is being banned. The video I just showed you is from 2020. You get where I'm going with this? I mean, this is how long this has been an issue. The ban is about getting in front of this. This is legislation to protect our country. This is why there needs to be an understanding of how the ban works and how it is structured.
The law that now requires by Sunday that TikTok's Chinese government, communist government controlled parent company sell TikTok to a non-foreign adversary of the United States. Can't sell it to Iran, can't sell it to Russia, got to sell it to somebody who's independent and isn't going to try to control it for its own purposes to undermine national security.
If anything is simple to understand, it would be what he just broke down. If TikTok had been sold as outlined in the ban, then the ban would have never happened. Also, many of you don't know that the Supreme Court, in letting the ban take place, took the time to call out the orange guy on this issue.
They also take a moment to stick it to Donald Trump and remind Donald Trump that he, in 2020, completely supported this particular ban, issued an executive order that would have forced the same sale. They not only mention his 2020 actions to block and ban TikTok, which now he's completely flip-flopped on, but they don't even mention his amicus brief, his friend of the court brief, which he filed a week or two ago, that he said, hey, I got this. I'm going to be the president soon. Give me more time. Don't make a ruling. Don't force the sale on Sunday. I'll make a deal.
And this is where we are right now. Since the majority of people don't know what's going on, I mean, we all have to go into conspiracy mode to try to understand this. But there is something I'm going to come back at you later on that will show how smart Biden is as it pertains to all of this. Most people don't see it, but when you do, it will make sense. Congress is the one responsible for pushing this ban, and they did so while also acknowledging TikTok's popularity.
There is no doubt that for more than 170 million Americans, TikTok offers a distinctive and expansive outlet for expression, means of engagement, and source of community. But Congress is determined that divestiture is necessary to address its well-supported national security concerns regarding TikTok's data collection practices and relationship with a foreign adversary. Read that as China. For the foregoing reasons, we conclude, we, the 9 justices of the Supreme Court, that the challenged provisions do not violate petitioners' First Amendment rights. If the judgment of the lower court is affirmed, it is so ordered.
And that is another reason that people keep pushing who really don't understand how the ban works. This ban has nothing to do with freedom of speech. Even today, Sunday, January 19th, even today, when TikTok came back online, they stated that it was a win for the First Amendment. See, that's the con right there, because that goes along with conspiracy theories, which is sad, because it seems that people can't think beyond what is being fed to them. The national security risk is real, but we don't understand how TikTok can be used beyond just collecting data. The information obtained can be used for cyber attacks. In the case of TikTok, the security risk arises from what they call a supply chain security issue.
We know that malicious actors don't come to big companies through the front door. They find weaker links, and an entertainment app that's downloaded on employee phones and devices is certainly a vulnerable opportunity, essentially a side door that could be exposed. So companies really have to look and make a risk management decision about the risk reward and what they're willing to roll the dice on and what they're not willing to sacrifice.
What she said is why the DoD banned TikTok from all personnel back in December of 2019. And when TikTok presented their case against being banned in court, I mean, basically, their argument was weak.
TikTok argued in court that well, they couldn't really address the security issues because they said it's unlikely that the Chinese government would force TikTok to do anything, even though they control it, which did not sit well with these justices. What they said was, It's our First Amendment rights, and it's the First Amendment rights of the 170 million Americans. The Supreme Court said this corporate divestiture statute requiring the forced sale of the assets is not a direct hit on First Amendment expression.
So, please stop using that First Amendment narrative. It doesn't apply here. And if you choose to keep applying it, then I'm going to take that you choose to be willfully ignorant on this matter. You don't want to know that one of your outlets could be bad for you. And you know what? I can dig that. But the reality of the matter is this.
Chinese companies that enter the US come in with a presumption of guilt, and that's based on years of intellectual property theft that we know that's been documented by the Chinese government, by China in general. So there is always a risk management decision, knowing that when these companies are coming in, certainly not all of them potentially pose this risk, but we don't know how many actually do. And we have to do our homework and do the due diligence on how we're protecting ourselves and the security of our nation.
This is all about national security. And people just can't seem to understand this.
TikTok is a Chinese-owned company, as long as it has its grounding in China, and that the Chinese government, by the rule of law in Beijing, has the ability to access TikTok, that we really have to look again at how we're treating it. And it goes, again, where personal use interferes with company use. And that's really representative of where we are today. We don't have these lines that protect one sector from another sector. We're in an era of interdependencies now. So what you do, what I do personally on our phones is very much linked to whatever workplace we're in, because we don't have those boundaries. So even though what we often hear is, well, it's an entertainment app, what does that have to do? If it's on your phone, it is a link to something bigger and better that you're a part of. So certainly if you're an employee of a large company, it becomes an access point to you. And we've seen lots of evidence in the past of using a part of the supply chain that may not be linear in order to get into a company.
TikTok represents a foreign adversary-controlled application in communications of the United States. Once they found it to be a foreign adversary-controlled application, the next step was it can be banned because it is a threat to our national security. People think TikTok is just like this independent platform. It's not. It's owned and controlled ultimately through the Communist Party of China. And it's not just about data collection, although the United States Supreme Court and Congress are both very concerned about data collection, and because it's a black box. We don't know what they're collecting, how they're collecting it, how they're vacuuming it up into their AI, and how they're using it against America to make us more vulnerable. Right? It's not just about the videos. It's about the platform ownership and data collection, not what you're making, what they're doing with your information.
I'm hoping that this is beginning to click. It is not something that someone can completely grasp and understand from a meme or someone brushing this off as something that everyone does. This is a unique situation that must be viewed on its own. And the reasons go back to 2020.
So there are two things. There's both the election security issue and then where we are right now. So we've spent the last 3 months as a nation going to an entire remote workforce, and it's happened globally. And so we've gotten used to securing and identifying ways to have secure remote workforces. But I think one of the greatest challenges that we now will have as we look into the rest of 2020 is how do we secure the hybrid workforce? What we know is that many U.S. companies will bring about 20% of their workforce back to the office. So what that means is you'll have a hybrid environment of people working in a physical secure office and then people working from home. So companies really need to be paying attention to the policies that are long-term. A lot of companies had to put together makeshift policies to handle the immediate crisis. But what we have to look at now are longer-term strategic policies for security that respect and acknowledge the hybrid environment of personal workspaces as well as physical spaces.
She's right. She makes sense. She knows her shit. And you have to take her serious and why what she says is important in understanding the factual reasons for the ban of TikTok.
TikTok is operated in the United States by TikTok Incorporated, an American company incorporated in California. TikTok's parent company is ByteDance, a privately held company that is operated in China. ByteDance owns TikTok's proprietary algorithm, also a concern of the United States Supreme Court, which is developed and maintained in China. The company is also responsible for developing portions of the source code that runs the TikTok platform. ByteDance is subject to Chinese laws that require it to assist or cooperate with the Chinese government's intelligence work and to ensure that the Chinese government has the power to access and control private data that the company holds. In other words, in order to do business in China, ByteDance has to agree to completely bend over, turn over all of its data and information, basically let its servers be pulled at any time by the Communist Chinese government. That's the problem, folks. In August 2020, the opinion recites, to address national security concerns, President Trump issued an executive order on his own pen, finding that, quote, the spread in the United States of mobile applications developed and owned by companies in China continues to threaten the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. President Trump determined that TikTok raised particular concerns, noting that the platform automatically captures vast swaths of information from its users and is susceptible to being used to further the interests of the Chinese government. The president invoked his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to prohibit those transactions and start the process of the divestiture. Next page, page 4. Just days after issuing his initial executive order, President Trump, again, sticking it to Trump, ordered ByteDance to divest all interest in rights used to enable or support ByteDance operations and the TikTok application in the United States. ByteDance filed a lawsuit in the District of Columbia challenging the constitutionality of the order. And then throughout 2021 and 2022, ByteDance negotiated with the executive branch officials to develop national security agreement that resolved those concerns. But that stalled and failed, and they never finalized an agreement, which led to Congress passing the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act.
See, while all of you are talking about the orange guy being for the people, Joe was actually working on keeping the app from being banned. That alone debunks many of the conspiracy theories out there right now.
This divestiture requirement is not a direct hit on First Amendment. It's content neutral because they don't care what's on the content. They just want the corporate asset to be sold. And since they focused on the corporate asset, they did not find direct First Amendment implications to apply the strict scrutiny standard in order to rule for TikTok and against the ban. The government also supports the challenge provisions with a content-neutral justification, preventing China from collecting vast amounts of sensitive data from 170 million U.S. TikTok users. That rationale is decidedly content agnostic. It neither references the content of speech on TikTok nor reflects disagreement on the message such speech conveys. Then they go over to say, we're talking about a corporate divestiture of a foreign adversary-controlled app. We're not talking about the First Amendment. The new law prohibits the new law's prohibitions and divestiture requirement are designed to prevent China, a designated foreign adversary, from leveraging its control over ByteDance to capture the personal data of U.S. TikTok users. This objective qualifies as an important government interest under intermediate scrutiny, which is the scrutiny level they are applying to this. Rather than meaningfully dispute the scope of the data TikTok collects or the ends to which it may be used, petitioners, TikTok, contest probability, asserting that it is unlikely that China would compel TikTok to turn over user data for intelligence gathering purposes, since China has more effective and efficient means of obtaining relevant information. Like, China's much better at it. They don't need TikTok. In reviewing the constitutionality of the act, however, we must accord substantial deference to the predictive judgments of Congress. In other words, that's not what Congress thinks. And so we're going to go with Congress's position. The act is sufficiently tailored, this is the one requiring divestiture, to address the government's interest in preventing a foreign adversary from collecting vast swaths of sensitive data from 170 million U.S. TikTok users. To survive this scrutiny, the standard is justified so long as the regulation promotes a substantial government interest that would be achieved less effectively absent the regulation. The Biden administration, very smartly, is not going to enforce the ban on Sunday night. They're going to there's only hours left until Trump takes office. Trump, this is going to make for a very awkward inauguration, because the TikTok president is going to be a VIP sitting near or next to Donald Trump, like effectively on his lap. And all the tech people like Apple with the App Store for TikTok are going to be sitting in and around Donald Trump as well. And the vice president or vice premier of China is coming for the inauguration. The premier decided not to come. So it's going to make for an awkward moment. Trump has already said that he's flip-flopped on his 2020 rulemaking and decision about TikTok that the Supreme Court relied on, because A, he's got an investor who's best friends with him who supports and invests in ByteDance. That's one. And two, his son, Barron, this is like Fredo giving advice to The Godfather. But Barron told him that TikTok is a great way to get elected. And so he fell in love with TikTok and podcasts and all this stuff. And so Donald Trump wants to broker a deal to the sale of TikTok, and he wants more time to do it. But the Supreme Court is like saying, we're not giving you more time. You want to do something, you want to not enforce the law. Joe Biden very smartly threw a political hand grenade to Donald Trump and says, you don't want to do it? You look the American people in the eye and you tell them why you don't think it's any longer a security risk that a foreign adversary controlled communications application is operating in the United States. Go ahead, you do it. And then, of course, we're able to use that and Donald Trump's waste of political capital and lying to the American people against him at midterm and for the next presidential election. Very smart, cunning political move by Joe Biden and his administration on the way out. I don't see Donald Trump enforcing it on Monday. I think he'll try to extend the time, arguing that there's some deal in the works, which there isn't. Maybe his own Truth Social will be involved, another violation of the Constitution for him to benefit from this law.
So, I hope that this has been informative. You now know the facts of this situation and how and when it began. So, if you want to ignore all of this information, if you choose not to take this information and verify it yourself, then cool. But understand this: dismissing everything that has been presented perfectly summarizes our regression as a nation. Talk to you soon. Ciao, ciao.